Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the January 22nd, 2019 meeting of the Titusville CRA at 5:30. We have a quorum. I'll call this meeting to order. Do we have anybody who would like to say an invocation this evening? If not, please join me in a moment of silence. Please join me in the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item of business, special recognition and presentations. Mr. City Manager?
Yes, sir. Ms. Busaka will come forward and recognize Mr. Tim Ford of the Planning Department as Titusville's Employee of the Month for November 2018.
I'm very pleased tonight that Tim Ford has been recognized as a November Employee of the Month. My mother always told me I need to watch the quiet ones. And I know I didn't do a very good job with that if anybody's ever met my husband. But aside from that, Tim is one of those quiet employees. And when you watch, you see he does remarkable things. He treats the downtown as it were his own property. He picks up trash when he walks through. He repairs kiosks without asking anyone. Recently, there was some concrete that was left after a development project. No one would fess up to who left it, so Tim went out there and cleaned it up because one of your constituents and ours was concerned about that next to their business. So that's the kind of person that Tim quietly goes about with no recognition at all, that he just does what he does because he likes to contribute, and he's a wonderful employee, and we're very fortunate to have him. So thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you very much. Thanks for all you do. I appreciate it.
You got to take a picture, Tim.
Oh, yeah, take a picture. You come?
Oh, if you'd like. I can't.
Want to get in the middle or?
No, I don't care. Whatever. All right, good.
And Mayor, if I could, next recognition of the December 2018 from Support Services, we have Kathy Bracken, David Marquette, and from Administration, Charlene Lehman, who's a manager. And we'll have Joe DeNiro describe the successes of this group.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Council members. Joe DeNiro, Human Resources Director. I think all of us during our job searches at one point in our lives filled out a written application for employment. Well, all that changed. From 4 ambitious members that you have two representing the HR department, Laura and Kathy, David from IT, and Charlene from City Clerk's office, all prepared an applicant tracking system electronically and digitally processing an applicant tracking system. So what we used to do before is complete a paper application, but using their expertise and using a management document system that the city already has, Laserfish and Access Point or SharePoint, those documents now are shared with the operating department heads as an applicant comes digitally through the HR thread. The HR recruiter is able to take that electronic application, process it and store it in Laserfish and move it then over to SharePoint so the operating department heads can make notes in interviewing, can share it with other departments in terms of those applicants, screen those applicants, and call those applicants for interviews all digitally, ultimately leading up to notifying the HR coordinator of the ultimate selection, then leads electronically through the process of onboarding. Well, let's back up a little bit. Background screening, onboarding, and then through the payroll system electronically. So this was an ambitious effort by 4 of our employees, getting ahead of the market in terms of being able to aggressively go out and recruit applicants digitally, being able to process them before other communities hire them. So I think all in all, it added to our efficiencies. And, you know, at the end of the day, I think if you had to go out and purchase, and we are looking at a sophisticated process, but until then, we're able to keep up with the market. A program like this, applicant tracking program, probably cost the city $35,000 or $40,000. But they did it just with their time and their effort, and I'm very proud to be a part of that team. Thank you.
Absolutely. Again, thank you all for all that you do and all that you've done on this project. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it. Next item, Mr. City Manager.
Yes, sir. This is award to Council Member Sarah Stokel for the Certificate of Completion for the Florida League of Cities Municipal Leadership Program. I have the certificate, and maybe we could just toss it since she's a little under the weather.
Just throw it over. You want to go down in front? We'll get our picture taken.
Do we? I do not even look good right
You what?
Oh, my God.
Go.
That's a mayor's order. Mayoral proclamation.
I wouldn't come near her, though.
Yeah, here I am.
Yeah. I was really glad to be down here.
Doctor Sarah.
now. This is my better side.
Wow. Talk about ordering people around, right?
I know. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not going to shake your hand because I don't want to be sick.
Right, that's why I'm going this way.
Okay.
On 14 February 2017, Council approved advisabilities to grant funds to the expansion project's Space Coast Fab Lab, project-based learning in Titusville. Space Coast Fab Lab is owned and operated by Project Based Learning Incorporated and has leased property at 4005 Capron Road in Titusville through March 2020 and held a grand opening on 17 June 2017. As required by the agreement, a quarterly report was provided by council, and I think we have some representatives. Ray, representative? Nope. They were notified and, yep.
I apologize. I thought that they were here. They've been notified a number of times and at one point had confirmed this presentation.
That's okay. They did send the report, however?
There is a,
Okay, that's all we really need at this
okay.
point. So,
Should,
not a problem,
okay, thank you.
sure. We do need a motion to accept their report.
Move for approval, sir.
I have a motion, I have a second.
With discussion?
Go ahead, yeah. Go ahead, sir.
I appreciate them having the report. I know that we've been through several meetings along the way that we were very concerned about some things, and I do appreciate the report. And I'm glad we have the report, but I definitely would like to see somebody there to ask some questions of. And just to kind of, I'm not accusing of anything, just wanting to hear how they feel about things and where it's going. So I would still, at some point, like to have them become present.
I don't disagree with you. That would be very nice. I will say that we really don't, at this point, have much responsibility to them nor them to us. There is no more financing coming out. I want to make sure everybody understands that. What we have given them as part of our agreement, that's all they will receive until we see some further action. So, but we can request it again if you'd like, and that's not a problem. Ms. Basaka, will you try again, please? Thank you.
With that,
Go
second.
ahead. You still got it. Well, we have others. Well, yeah, we're still in speaking. So, Member Stokel.
Yep, just to follow that up. So worst case scenario, if we do not get any presentation from them or anything, can we just summarize? I know we didn't give them the full 50,000, but can we just summarize what does happen financially from here at this point? I know we've given them, I think, around 33,000, and then as far as the equipment, those things, just so I can feel better, I guess, about if they don't show
Ms. Basaka,
up.
would you like to do that, or have the city attorney do that?
I was hoping Mr. Broom would, but
Yeah,
for training wheels.
right. I'll reference on December 3rd, council had asked for a memorandum outlining the city's rights under the agreement, and I've provided that, and their obligations. We have reimbursed them for capital equipment and approximately $33,000. And their obligation is to perform under this contract for a period of 3 years from May 15th, 2017. So according to the memorandum, if they don't comply, we do have certain rights in the event of default, one of which is to seize the equipment back that we have funded and then utilize that equipment for another nonprofit for a public purpose. We did file, liens on that equipment. They're aware of that. We did have a meeting with Fab Lab maybe 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks
It was
ago.
before Christmas.
It was before
probably,
Christmas?
Mhm.
And
It was
about a month ago then.
Right, about a month.
And at that point, they did tell staff that they were aware of their requirements, they were working on them. So I agree with you, I think we need to reach out to them and find an update on where they are on those requirements. They talked about working with FIT. I don't want to speak for them, but these are kind of things that they were telling staff that they were working in compliance. So we certainly can reach out to them, find out where they are. To answer your question, if we find they're in default and we want to move down that road, we could look at seizing the equipment we funded back and utilizing those for a different purpose.
Okay. Anything else, sir? You, Vice Mayor, anything else you want?
Just that, and sort of what the city attorney said reiterates what I'm trying to say. I get where you're at, Mayor, and I certainly am ready to move on, but I heard all the passion and excitement from them, and I went and visited the site several times, and it was going on. I guess what I'd like to hear from them is what went wrong, what went right, and what would they do different. Not accusing anything, just saying that something didn't go as they had planned, and I'd kind of like to hear for future benefit what happened.
Well, you're absolutely right, and we kind of discussed that the last time. And again, we will request them to come in so that we can have some further discussion with them. Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Is there something about this you want to talk about?
No, the only thing I wanted to add was if they do not come the next time, then I think at that point we need to seriously look at taking the equipment back. I know I've reached out to them on several occasions and have gotten no response. There seems to be a problem there whatever it is, it's still our 33,000 that went in it. And if they don't want to respond, then hand the equipment back. So,
Would you like to make that
second?
second? You got motion and second.
I
Anybody?
can do it.
As part of the discussion, please let them know the feelings of council this evening in detail. I appreciate that. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign, passes unanimously. Next, sir.
Next is Mr. Brad Parrish will present a draft comprehensive plan citywide development strategy for objective 1.9 and the policies to implement the land uses. Mr. Parrish.
I'll make this short. I just want to give you a brief update of what's going on. Back in December, you gave us advisability to go forward with continuing revisions to the draft comprehensive plan that we came up with the help of Canaan Associates out of Orlando. And then you also included in that advisability direction for us to go forward with transmittal hearings to allow the state to at least review our draft and provide comment. So I'm just going to show you a few slides about how one portion of this plan will be how the plan will be implemented. And there are a set of objectives that we came up with to help describe that. And the reason why we came up with this, let's see, this will work here. I'm actually going to skip around. We'll get there one day. All right. Here we go. Okay. So the reason is because of the proposed land use map that we've come up with would consolidate several of the land use categories. For example, you'll see a lot of, you're very familiar with the layout of the city of Titusville. You see along the east portion there a large land use that is generally just what we call a gateway land use, and that is really US 1, Hopkins, and that whole area. And there's a big purple area there, that's the downtown. It's an expanded land use there. Those are just two examples of consolidated land use categories. If you go forward with adoption of the draft comprehensive plan, it won't automatically adopt the land uses on all the properties throughout the city or change people's land uses. That's going to be a separate process, and that's what I want to briefly describe to you. If the plan is approved, it becomes effective, and then it becomes basically our means of what we would recommend to you in the event a property owner asks for a land use change. That land use change would be consistent with the newly adopted comprehensive plan. So in essence, the old plan or the old land use categories will still govern the property until that property owner asks for a land use change. And then we'll go forward based on what that new comprehensive plan says. I just want to go back real quick to the other slide I had here where, yeah, I'm sorry, here we go. One of the reasons why we're suggesting more of a mixed-use type land use categories is because we've been getting a lot of inquiries the past year, especially, for opportunities to redevelop properties, especially along our commercial corridors. And these are just some examples. There's a property that's currently zoned industrial, has a land use industrial that's on Main Street. I've received several calls by an attorney and their client about what they can do, especially as far as putting residential on there. It's currently not allowed in our comp plan. But if our new comp plan was in place, they'd be able to do this through a public hearing process. We've also received requests about what the development potential of the Winn-Dixie property over on Barna and Harrison on the northwest corner there. The property owner came to us asking about how they can redevelop and potentially put mixed use on there. And in fact, we even saw a brief rendering of what could possibly be put there. Currently, the comprehensive plan doesn't even allow that. So what our new comprehensive plan draft allows for that with some caveats, of course. And there are several other areas around the city that we've received similar inquiries to this, that currently the comprehensive plan does not allow, but the new one would. Well, what I wanted to point to you in your agenda was On page 69 of your packet, you'll see the actual objectives. I'm not going to go through and read each of those, but they just outline the process that we've came up with the assistance of the city attorney. And these, if they are implemented or adopted, they will just provide a process for us that we have illustrated here on page 71 of your packet. Well, the presentation's a little slow. Here we go. Okay, so what I wanted to show you real quick was what is really mixed use. I think we presented this slide to you once before. So let's say a developer comes in and wants to put a mixed use development there that includes some portion of residential and maybe some other types of non-residential uses there. There would be some caveats. They would need to provide certain amenities and certain design standards in there that we currently do not have in our code. So to fully implement the comprehensive plan, we would adopt the land use categories and then adopt urban design standards that would go along with that inside our land development code. That's a whole nother step, and we do have advisability to go forward with what's called a form-based code from you. So as soon as we have direction with funding, we'll certainly provide more information to you about the specifics of that and how that will work. But a mixed-use development could include townhomes, it could include single-family homes, it could include a new town center, all mixed in with one larger development. And I just threw in some photographs here that include some aspects of what that could look like. This is, and these are from examples around the state of Florida. And so this just kind of gives you an idea of what a layout of what a mixed-use development might look like. And what we're proposing is that currently, until the new land use categories are put in place, that when a property owner asks for a mixed-use development like this, they're going to be required to go through a land use change. In order to implement that, be public hearings, and then we would allow them to go through what's called a plan development process so that we can work with them and negotiate how these aspects of mixed use would be incorporated into the development. And so a planned development zoning, which is a tool we currently have right now, would be expanded to not only just apply to the single-family clustering, clustering single-family lots in a subdivision, but could be applicable to other types of development, such as industrial-type uses that might mix other uses with it, retail uses that might include residential with it. We did draft it for a draft ordinance for the golf course redevelopment a couple of years ago. It certainly could be applicable to that if that's ever resurrected. This is the process diagram that what we came up with. It's on page 71 of your packet, and this is what I'm just going to focus on. The first scenario there really describes if in the event if the comprehensive plan is adopted, we currently don't have the land uses on the properties. How would that work? How would that comprehensive plan be implemented? So in this first scenario, what it's saying, or what it's describing here, is that the property owner would ask us to I want to put residential on my property when currently it's not allowed. Okay, go through a land use change. We will make a recommendation based on the new comprehensive plan as to what that land use would be. That would allow a mixed use development. Then they would go through a plan development process to provide an actual concept plan that we would negotiate with them. We would work with them on that. And so it would go through a public hearing process and vet it through that process to get that development approved. And it would have to come before the city council. I think the second scenario is a little bit different. Now let's say we have the comprehensive plan approved and the land use is already on the property. We've got them implemented. We went through our series of ordinances and got those on the property now. But we don't have the urban design standards in place. We don't have the land development code updated yet. They don't have to go through a land use change. They just need to go through a plan development process. Provide the concept plan, we'll work with you to come up with those features that are appropriate for a mixed-use development. The third scenario is if now we have the comprehensive plan adopted, and we have the land uses adopted, they're all on the property now, and we have the urban design standards. We had the land development code implemented. It's adopted. We went through the whole process of coming up with a new code. In that third scenario, as long as they meet all those standards, they do not have to go through a public hearing process unless there may be a special circumstances like a conditional use permit. The only time it would go through some kind of public hearing process is if they wanted to deviate from those standards. That would be a variance or maybe a waiver to City Council. So those are the three scenarios that we've come up with. That's what this objective 1.9 describes in order to help us implement this comprehensive plan. The first step is adopting the comprehensive plan. We'll get the state to review it, and we'll get their comments and make changes with your recommendation. And then once that's adopted, then the land use categories will be adopted. And that will take several months. That may take up to a year or more to do that. The map I showed you before, the low-hanging fruit to us is really the downtown. We'd like to work with everybody. If that's the first step, we can go forward with updating the land use categories or applying them on the properties. We see that the downtown land use category is probably going to be the most supported. There is also an opportunity with the new research and manufacturing land use category that really consolidates everything, especially what we have in the south part of the city with the industrial uses, into one massive large land use category instead of the 4 or 5 that we have right now. And then the next step possibly is the commercial corridors. And we propose to you one larger mixed use land use category for those commercial corridors, and that's called the Gateway Corridor. I hope that was clear. I see some straining of eyes here. There may be some questions or some confusion. I'll certainly try and answer some of your questions here.
Any questions? I have Member Jordan.
I'll take it for sure.
You push the button first, you get the...
Yeah, I was watching the other one, so. Thanks for the presentation. I got a couple of questions. First of all, what would it cost a individual to go through scenario 1?
Our current process allows someone to go through a land use change and a rezoning, which is a PD master plan if they wanted to do that. And the application fee right now, I think is about $1,800. And then there's a cost for the land use to be advertised, which I believe is about $1,200. So that's roughly what the application fee is for.
So $1,200 and $1,800.
Yeah.
Wow. So looking at this, you've got a little arrow here that says least certain versus most certain. So the most certain is going to cost less.
That's right.
The least certain is going to cost the person a lot more money. And how long will it take?
Our standard land use review process takes minimum 3 months. We typically, when we receive an application, we estimate out about 3 months as to when those public hearings might happen. So that's a land use scenario. But if it's a large-scale development, 10 acres or more, it will require a state review to review it, and that's state law. And so that will take a few more months. I would say probably about 6 months at the minimum, if it's a large project.
Okay, and since I'm inquisitive, and you were talking about the Winn-Dixie area, what type of mixed use are we talking about there?
We had questions about whether they could put a multifamily development there.
Really?
In addition to out parcels where there would be some retail on the property. So totally redeveloped site.
So they're talking about tearing down the old area and putting new?
All or part of it, yes, sir.
Really? Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Member Stokel?
Thank you. I had a couple questions. My first one, could you remind me what the yellow color was on this map? Because I see a lot of it, and I just can't, I was looking for it.
So, okay, that is the single-family, primarily single-family subdivision. So that's
Okay.
called a neighborhood land use category.
Okay, and so I'm trying to understand this. So can we use the example of what's happening right now with the Park Avenue subdivision potentially? So right now, it's my understanding that's not consistent with our comp plan. Now, should this have been in place, would that have been consistent? And how would that process look with a new comp plan looking like this as opposed to how it is currently?
I think it would, we still have the conservation land use in place. We are not proposing to change that. Obviously, we could certainly look at that in the future, or even as part of this process when we adopt the land use categories. But right now, we're not recommending any changes to it. So I would say they would probably be in the same pickle
Okay.
But as far as the process of allowing someone to do a clustered development and still allow them the flexibility of utilizing the same number of residential units, that process would not change. So we still have the option in the new comp plan to allow someone to cluster
Okay.
density together on small lots, provided they save a significant portion of their property for open space or conservation.
So potentially what this would be helping the city out and us out would be somebody could come in and not necessarily have to do a comprehensive like amendment, but just come in and maybe do a rezoning. Is that correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, let's say we had the comprehensive plan in place, and then we went through the process and applied the land uses on all the properties. So the map, our new future land use map, looks like what you see on the screen here. But we don't have the code in place. We don't have the urban design standards in place yet. We don't have the land development code updated. That was where a rezoning would potentially happen. Whatever the process we come up with to allow someone to submit to us a concept plan, that we would work with you to make sure those aspects for mixed-use development are included in there, that would be the rezoning. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, I like it. I appreciate all you guys have done. I feel like it's making our job a little easier, helping us to see the whole picture. And then if we agree with this and we like it, then we can go in and kind of, touch on those zoning pieces and, like you said, start with the downtown area. So, thank you.
Member Nelson?
I love it. I'm not sure I totally understand it, but I'm working at it. You were talking about it's supposed to encourage mixed use. So in an industrial area, what would that look like?
That depends. I mean, a mixed use doesn't necessarily have to include residential. So it could include a mixture of retail, maybe, with industrial uses.
Okay.
I think you've got an example of that right now with the Bricks.
Okay.
I mean, that's a restaurant, that's a retail use mixed with an industrial use. And we were able to do a code change to allow that particular use there. So that's an example.
Okay. I was just curious about that.
Vice Mayor?
Well done. I think you are our #1 report giver of the year. You were there a
So
lot.
far.
You were there a lot. But I'm glad you guys, your department and you are in front of the curve, because so often you guys are out there, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, what's coming. And I think that's important. I think mixed use is going to be huge as we move into the more redevelopment, away from the simple development. And I've learned so much sitting here in the last few years about the fact that we hear things like there's not a lot of places to continue to build, et cetera. And the redevelopment is going to be the key. And your mixed use is going to be a real important part of that. So I appreciate you being out front.
Any other questions? I see no lights. Thank you, sir. Very good report. We need a motion on this item.
Just to accept it, yes.
Move for approval?
Second.
Accept?
Who made the motion?
I did.
Robert.
Okay, would you read, our city attorney likes the, huh? What?
She's being mean. Yeah, I don't worry about you.
Accept the draft comprehensive.
Okay, I move to accept the draft comprehensive plan, citywide development strategies, objective 1.9, and policies to implement the land uses.
Now, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further
Glad I
discussion?
know how to read.
Not hearing any. I'm still hearing something. Not hearing any. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, like sign. Passes unanimously. Next item, sir.
Yes, sir. Letters of appreciation we've received from the following employees I'd like to read for the record. Tracy Davis of Neighborhood Services, Terry Franklin of Neighborhood Services, Rose Koning of Neighborhood Services, and Laura Bledsoe from HR.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Petitions and requests. Would anybody from the audience like to speak at this point on anything on this part of our meetings? I see none. With that, anybody have anything else they'd like to discuss here? No? We are completed and we are adjourned on this meeting. Next meeting will start at 6:30.